Unlitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam stapitam yena bhutale Swayam rupa kadamayam dadati swapadantikam Mao Vishnu Vraya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Bacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Satarane. Today I'm going to read from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, text number 22, and I'll read some other verses too. Beginning with Yehi Samasparshya Bhoga Dukayone Evate Adyantavanta Konteya Nate Shuramate Buddha. Translation purported by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material sense with their objects. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise person doesn't delight in them. So Prabhupada's purport: material sense pleasures are due to the contact of the material senses, which are all temporary. The body itself is temporary. The liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary, knowing well the joys of transcendental pleasure. How can a liberated soul agree to enjoy false pleasure? Padma Purana said, Ramante yogino nante, satyanande chidatmani, iti rama adena so, param brahma vidiyate. The mystics derive unlimited transcendental pleasure from the absolute truth, and therefore the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead, is known as Rama. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also, 5.1, it is said, Nanyon deho deha bhajam riloke, pastan taman arate vidibhudyam ye, tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam, yasmad brahma sokyam punantam. My dear sons, there is no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters on. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life by which your existence will be purified, and as a result, you'll be able to enjoy unlimited bliss, transcendental bliss. Therefore, those who are true yogis who learn the transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasure, which are the causes of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped in material misery. Here, Krishna is telling Arjuna that real happiness is not derived by the contact with the senses, especially by touch sensation. So that's called samsparsha. That in the material world, everyone is looking for happiness, as everyone in the spiritual world also is looking for happiness, because happiness is our natural experience. But in the material world, we're looking for happiness in a way which is not suitable for our real selves, namely the soul. We're trying to enjoy happiness through this material body, which is external to ourselves. Just like we have Sunday, today's Sunday, most parts of the world. And we used to have Sunday feasts. I don't know if they still have them some places, but on Sunday there used to be a nice feast. But if you go to the feast and you put a glove on your tongue, then you probably won't enjoy the food as much as if you didn't have a glove on your tongue. Similarly, this material body is just like a glove over the spiritual senses. we ourselves, we are a spiritual body, and we have spiritual senses, as we have a spiritual mind, and we have spiritual intelligence. We have even a spiritual ego. That ego is Krishna Das. I am Krishna or Dasi. I am Krishna's eternal servant. Now, being covered by the illusory energy, we're thinking, I am Kamadas, or I am Krodadas, or I am Lobadas. Being deluded by the material energy, we're thinking ourselves to be so many things that actually we're not. And because we identify with these things, and as it says in this verse, that the material body has certain pushings, as we'll say in the next verse, called vagams. We're always being pushed to do something with this body in order to satisfy our minds or our senses, and ultimately our false ego is pushing us. But such happiness that we obtain by such endeavors is not real happiness. It is not that we can deny this material body. This body can be utilized for Krishna service. Just like, for instance, Sanatana Goswami, he was coming through the Jharkhand forest in order to meet Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. And on the way there, because the forests were quite big, especially the Jharkhand forest is a very big forest, and there's no restaurants in the forest, nor are there any food stalls. There's no supermarkets. I mean, this is prehistoric times, practically speaking. Nor was there any mass transportation. You couldn't take a bus through the Jharkhand forest, nor could you take a train or an airplane. You could walk, you had to walk. Sanatana Goswami walked for many, many days through the Jharkhand forest, and obviously he could not take enough food supply. So whatever was available on the way, he had to eat, whether it be roots or leaves, or whatever was available, fruits, whatever he could find. Similarly, there were no hotels to bathe in. So he bathed in whatever was available, whatever water he could find. But he found some water which was contaminated, and he bathed in it. And therefore he developed this itching sensations, these sores all over his body, which were oozing pus. When he got to Jagannath Puri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very happy to see him, and he embraced Sanatana Goswami. But when he embraced Sanatana Goswami, that this pus from his sores oozed all over the body of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sanatana Goswami was very disturbed by that. And he thought, I'm committing a great offense by embracing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this went on for some time. So Sanatana Goswami was thinking, I'm making offenses every time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraces me. Therefore, the best thing I can do is take my body during the Rath Yatra ceremony. If anyone has seen the Rath Yatra ceremony in Jagannath Puri, the carts are huge. And even the wheels are quite big. You could line 3 tall men, one on top of the other, and you'd understand what the span of the width of one of the wheels in the Jagannath cart is. Sanatana Goswami thought, during the Rath Yatra ceremony, let me throw myself underneath the wheel of the Jagannath cart, and therefore, certainly my destination will be auspicious, and I will no longer commit offenses against Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Every day, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come and visit Haridas Thakur and Sanatana Goswami. Haridas Thakur was living away from the temple because he thought that since I'm a Mohammedan, it would be improper for me to be close to the temple. And similarly, Sanatana Goswami, having practically been converted to Mohammedanism, Therefore, he was also staying apart from the temple. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he visited Haridas Thakur and Sanatana Goswami every day, although they could not go and see Lord Jagannath. Haridas Thakur and Sanatana Goswami could not see Lord Jagannath, but Lord Jagannath, in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, came and visited them every day. Now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was talking to Haridas Thakur, and he said, "My dear Haridas Thakur, that this man," referring to Sanatana Goswami, "he wants to destroy someone else's property. That he wants to, Sanatana Goswami understood that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is omniscient. He understood that he was planning to commit suicide. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued talking to Haridas Thakur, saying that, "My dear Haridas Thakur, is it proper that this man is going to misuse the body, my body, because I have plans for this body to write scriptures and discover holy places in Vrindavan, but he wants to end this body." So Sanatana Goswami understood that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "If by committing suicide, I could obtain Krishna, I'd commit suicide thousands of times." So Sanatana Goswami understood that his idea of committing suicide was not approved by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The idea is that actually this body we have, when it's utilized in Krishna's service, is not material, it becomes spiritualized. Just like if you put an iron in a fire, then it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And then eventually it becomes just like fire. So wherever you touch it, it becomes, wherever you touch it, there's fire. Similarly, when this body is utilized in Krishna's service, the more we're able to concentrate our activities, the more we're able to concentrate our minds and intelligence, and with the desire to please Krishna as Krishna's eternal servant, the more we are able to do that, then the more we become absorbed in Krishna's service. And as a result of that, the more Krishna reveals himself to us, and we become like fire. We enter into the spiritual realm of experience, and therefore Krishna's associates, Krishna's forms and his pastimes are there with us, and therefore wherever we go, we spiritualize that place. Just like Maharaj Vidura, when Vidura came back after pilgrimage, then Maharaj Yudhisthira greeted him with these words: "Bhavan vidas bhagavatas tirtha bhutak swayam vibho tirtha korvanti tirthani swantak stena gatavrataha." That saints like yourself are verily places of pilgrimage, because wherever you go, you turn that place into a place of pilgrimage because you carry the Supreme Lord within your heart. So all of us were eligible to carry Krishna within our heart. Not only Krishna will appear there, but Krishna's associates, including Srimati Radharani, the gopis, the cowherd boys, Mother Jasoda, Nanda Maharaj, the Vrindavan forest, Govardhan Hill, all these different manifestations of Krishna's energies will all appear within our heart, along with Krishna's transcendental pastimes. And when one is advanced enough, one can actually enter into those pastimes and actually live with Krishna in those pastimes, even while one is in a material body. And therefore, one will become electrified with spiritual energy. In any case, that's real happiness. That happiness cannot be achieved all at once, but the problem with material happiness is that it distracts us from the real happiness. Happiness we need, just like I said before, the first time I heard Prabhupada give a lecture personally, was when he came to Buffalo at the beginning of 1969. And the first thing he said before he began the lecture was he asked the devotees present, all 5 of us, do you want to become happy? And since no one had ever asked such a profound question before, no one amongst the devotees knew the answer to such a deep question. So no one answered, being afraid that maybe they would say the wrong thing. So Prabhupada looked a little concerned, and he repeated the same question again, asking the devotees, do you want to become happy? And still no one dared to respond, thinking that they might get the wrong answer. And the third time, Prabhupada asked the question, looking very concerned that, generally speaking, most human beings would have an answer to that question. So he was wondering exactly who he was dealing with. But he asked it again, just in case someone might guess the right answer. So he asked again, the third time, do you want to be happy? And finally, one devotee guessed and said, yes, Swamiji. At that time, Prabhupada was Swamiji. So Prabhupada said, oh, that's very good. So everyone wants to be happy. People think that the devotees, they're denying happiness. Just like there was one devotee who was the editor of Back to Godhead magazine, and who I know personally. And one time he left the movement and he started to write letters complaining about Prabhupada, saying that Prabhupada denies real happiness. So the question is, what was the happiness that Prabhupada was denying? That he was this particular devotee, he wanted to be a leader within the society, but he wouldn't give up living with his boyfriend. So Prabhupada said, if you want to live with your boyfriend, then you can't be the editor of Back to Godhead. So he left, and then he started to complain that Prabhupada was denying love in the movement. So there are different standards of happiness. There is bodily happiness, which is some kind of happiness. Govinda Das says it's like happiness that you get from having a drop of water in the desert. Certainly, if we're in the desert, we need water. And if the ambulance comes with the aid and they come out of their ambulance, they see someone dying of thirst in the desert, they take their bottle of water to give it to them, and one drop of water comes out, and they said, this man is saved. And then they get back into the ambulance looking for another person dying in the desert out of thirst. Certainly there's one drop of water, it's better than nothing, but it's not sufficient to save the man who is dying of thirst in the desert. So the question is, what is the actual real source of happiness, and how do we achieve it? So in the next verse, Krishna says, Shaknoti haiva yakshodum praksharira vimokshana. So this word is saknoti. Saknoti means to be able. Saknoti haiva yakshodum. Sodum means to tolerate. So this is a theme within the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam in all our literature, which is very important. Tolerance. This is something which is not taught very much in modern society. As a matter of fact, the opposite is taught. That if you get what you want, if you want to get what you want, then just don't be tolerant. Just like for children, I don't know, I haven't watched TV in some time, but I've been told, for those who watch TV, they can confirm, that on Sunday, especially in America, they'd have programs, cartoons for children. And I guess in all countries, they always have cartoons for children. And the advertisements in the cartoon, they tell the child that you must buy this product, whatever it is, some doll, or some, nowadays it's video games, some, whatever it is. And if your parents don't give it to you, then start to scream. And if you scream loud enough, then eventually you'll get what you want. That's how you show your determination. So sure enough, they have practically huge stalls, the size, stores, the size of our Vedic planetarium, TOVP. Just full of toys, video games, guns. You can build your own castle. You have your own robot to drive you around. And the children are screaming, I need this. I'm going to hold my breath until I turn blue if you don't give it to me. And the parents, in order to keep peace in the house, they just fill the house up with toys. Matter of fact, sometimes they have to buy another house just to put all the toys in. Prabhupada also did the same thing. He says that he was always very determined to get what he wanted. So when he was with his father in the street and he saw a toy gun, he asked his father, can you buy me the toy gun? And if his father didn't buy him the toy gun, he'd go into a tantrum. So finally his father would have to buy him the toy gun. And then he'd go into another tantrum. And his father said, well, I gave you the gun. Well, why are you going to another tantrum? He said, because I need another gun for my other hand. But if we want to make progress in spiritual life, one has to learn shodhum, tolerance. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita told Arjuna, the first instruction is that you're not this body, you're a spiritual being. But Arjuna would say, yes, I'm a spiritual soul. Everyone here is a spiritual soul, that's very nice. But still, it won't be very nice to kill my relatives, my grandfather, my teachers, my brothers. How can I be happy doing that? We may not be this body, but I have a relationship with these persons. And if I kill them, then I'm going to become very unhappy. And I don't want to be unhappy. So Krishna said, yes, you're right. If you kill these people, probably you're going to be unhappy. But you have to learn to tolerate this and not be disturbed. Now, Krishna was not interested in simply killing people, but Krishna already explained to Arjuna that no one dies. Everyone is eternal. But if we're eternally doing the wrong thing, that's not very auspicious. So Krishna wanted Arjuna at least to do the right thing, namely to serve him so he could get superior sense happiness. Now, Bhishma and Dronacharya, they were great devotees of Krishna, but still, somehow or another, they became implicated in their relationship with Duryodhana. And because they were being maintained by Duryodhana, therefore, instead of taking the side of Krishna and Krishna's devotees, they took the side of an asura, Duryodhana. And therefore, their activities were actually not very auspicious. On the other hand, Arjuna, by the end of the Bhagavad Gita, after his illusion was dispelled, then he was determined to fight on Krishna's behalf. And therefore, he was going to enjoy real happiness, which is not derived simply with contact with the senses when they're objects. So the Vedic culture is meant to cure this disease of material existence. Suppose a person is diseased and he's in the hospital. So, at least in an Ayurvedic hospital, the doctor would tell him that you must follow a certain diet.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, I'm sorry, can you little slow?
So,
медленнее. Простите, пожалуйста.
Call it. Okay. Kaneshna. So, if one is in a hospital, especially an Ayurvedic hospital, then they'll give you a diet. The doctor will give you a diet. Because in order to be cured, you have to follow a diet. Generally speaking, people become sick because they eat the wrong food. not only the wrong food, but they do the wrong activities. They are in anxiety all the time. They don't do any exercise. They don't get fresh air. They don't drink clean water. And they eat the wrong food. So an Ayurvedic doctor will prescribe a diet, as well as other things, exercise, that you have to drink clean water. But if a person is accustomed to eating a certain type of food, then he may not be very much inclined to that. As a matter of fact, I know one devotee, he would follow it very strictly. Well, he was one of my disciples who's now a professional psychiatric nurse, but he would give this particular devotee, when he was giving a naturopathic diet to him, a diet and massage treatment and oil massage and medicines, etc. But this devotee, he especially liked opulent food. So while he was taking this regimen of massages and he was supposed to follow a certain diet, and he was supposed to do a certain regime of fasting, he was eating pizza and ice cream every day. And when he could, there was lasagna, globulins, not to make anyone hungry, but he was he had two lives, the life during the day and the life at night. So obviously he never got cured. Matter of fact, he got sicker. So we're supposed to follow the diet that the doctor gives us, and then we can become cured, but we have to tolerate our desire to eat other foods during that time. And if we follow the diet and we take the proper treatment, then gradually we'll become cured. So the Veda culture was to train one to become cured of material existence. And therefore there was a system called Varna and Ashram. There was the brahmacharis, the grihastas, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasis. Everyone had a certain treatment, and that treatment was tolerance, abstaining, especially from illicit sex life. Prabhupada used to say, we're not against sex life, but we're against illicit sex life. In other words, sex life for no purpose whatsoever. Everything should have a purpose. Our purpose ultimately should be to go back to the spiritual world where we can enjoy real happiness, or at least in this lifetime, to come to the spiritual platform where we can become happy even in this lifetime. But if one follows a life where there is no restraint, no restriction, then one will find oneself, instead of advancing spiritually, one will increase one's suffering. So Varna and Ashram was meant to gradually decrease the fever of material existence. There's a story of one man, wealthy man. There was some sickness in his family. His servant got sick and his wife got sick. So he called the doctor. And at least in the Western world, they use Fahrenheit, and the doctor took the temperature of the wife, and she was 98. And the servant had 104 temperature. So his wife started complaining that why does the servant have a higher temperature than I have? I should have at least as higher temperature as she has. So that's modern civilization. If you reach 107 temperature and you're sick and you get 107 temperature, then you usually die. So modern civilization's at 104 and they're aiming for 107, thinking that why should anyone else have a higher temperature than we do? We must be the highest in everything, including temperature. So modern civilization is aiming cause increasing sense gratification rather than tolerating and lessening it. If you want to order food in some places, especially in the Western world, if you want to order pizza, then you call up the restaurant and the person jumps on a motorcycle with a pizza on his back and delivers the pizza to you within 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is. And if he doesn't get there within 5 minutes, then the pizza is free. So he'll zigzag through the traffic, risk his life, go through the red lights in order to deliver the pizza on time. Because 1 second longer, no one can tolerate. But one has to learn tolerance, much as Parshas Kuntiya. The senses, they certainly need some gratification, but if one tolerates 5 minutes, there should be any problem. One will not die. I remember one time I was on an airplane with one man sitting next to me, and he was watching the movie. Not a very sattvic movie. And at the same time, he was eating some unmentionable food. And at that time, he was reading a book at the same time. Not a transcendental book. And he was speaking to me, telling me how much anxiety he was in. So, if our minds are in 5 or 10 different places at the same time, obviously, if one sense probably gives the example, one man had several wives or many wives. And when he came home after his work, then one wife grabbed his hand in order to be with him. Another wife grabbed the other hand, pushing in the opposite direction. Another wife grabbed one of his feet. Another wife grabbed the other foot, and they were all pulling in different directions. So if our senses are pulling us in so many directions simultaneously, then it's very hard to be peaceful. What to speak of happy? Therefore, the training in the Varnashram culture was that the brahmacharis, the grihastas, the brahmacharis, the vanaprasthas, the sannyasis, they completely restrained from sense enjoyment, from sex life. Only the grihastas, under certain regulations, were allowed to enjoy sex life. So that was the training, to abstain, so that one could fix the mind upon Krishna without disturbance. Now, what will be the result? As Maharaj Rishabdev says, Tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam, shudyat tasmat brahma sokyam tvanantam. One will be able to enjoy unlimited happiness, which goes on forever. So we're not trying to deny happiness, we're trying to experience real happiness. Krishna consciousness is not just a theory, that we have so many books and a few devotees who like to read, they read the books and they get the theory and they can give the class. And a few devotees stay awake during the class. And everyone goes waiting for the realization of the philosophy when it's time for prasadam. And then we can finally get the real taste that we're after, which is nice. At least there's prasadam. But ultimately, the philosophy is meant so we can have that taste 24 hours a day, ever increasing. Even in our dreams, we can have pastimes with Krishna and enjoy unlimited pleasure, which goes on forever. So even if we can't experience that unlimited pleasure, at least we have to learn how to get some pleasure from Krishna consciousness, some higher taste. Because with that higher taste, then we can become fixed in our consciousness. So the beginning of that is tolerance. But when do we learn tolerance? Now, Lord Brahma, he was sitting on a lotus flower. Obviously, it was quite boring. The beginning of creation, there's nothing, because nothing was created. I mean, I'm sure the lotus flower is quite comfortable, but it probably smelled quite good sitting, it's probably the nicest seat anyone ever sat on. Still, he was looking around, it was all darkness. He couldn't see anything. Matter of fact, there's nothing to do, because there's no one to do it with. And there's nothing to do. So he decided to investigate, and there was nothing to investigate except for the lotus flower he was sitting on. So he climbed down the lotus flower, hoping to find out something where the stem of the lotus flower led to. But on his way down, he heard two syllables, ta pa. So he thought, well, that's the answer to my question. He went back onto the lotus flower and he started to meditate on tapa, which means austerity. And by doing so, he controlled his mind. Otherwise, he was in anxiety. Where am I? Just woke up. It's all dark here. I don't even have a match. I can't see what's going on. I'm sitting on this, Krishna knows what, or who knows who Krishna is. Anyhow, I'm sitting here. I've been here for 1,000 years. Nothing's happening. I'm getting bored. Something, and then finally he had something to do. He was fixed his mind on tapa. And when his mind became fixed, then Krishna revealed the spiritual world to him. Similarly, our minds are maybe going in many different directions, but we've been given this by the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're given this chanting and we're told that Krishna and Krishna's name are non-different. That Srimati Radharani and her name are non-different. And we're wondering, I've been chanting for so long and still I have not realized Krishna being non-different from his name. So maybe there's something wrong. Yeah, there is something wrong. There's something wrong with my following the process. Of course, I think most of us, Krishna is very merciful. And even when we make a slight endeavor somehow or another, then Krishna is very merciful. Then he gives us some taste at times for the chanting of the holy names or for our devotional service. But that taste we want to have all the time. And in order to have it all the time, we have to take the Hare Krishna mantras more seriously than we take anything else. We shouldn't look at our beads every day and think that this is a very difficult task I've been given. That my rascal spiritual master, he told me to chant 16 rounds, and it's a very heavy task he gave me. He's torturing me. Every time I say Hare Krishna, I feel worse and worse. So this is because we have to purify our heart, but the only way of purifying the heart is to chant Hare Krishna with some feeling. If it was up to us, up to our ability, up to our level of concentration, up to our memory, if everything was only up to us, our spiritual advancement, then we wouldn't spiritually advance at all. But Krishna is very merciful. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is merciful. Our acharyas, they're merciful. And they give us an opportunity to just try to show our sincerity. We may not even have any sincerity. But if we try to be sincere, we try to chant, calling out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna happily, not saying, my dear Lord, I have so many problems. I've come here to tell you what my problems are so you can solve them. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, this is the first problem. Krishna, Krishna, this is the second one. Hare Hare, this is the third one. That's all right. Prabhupada said that we have problems. You can go before Gaura or Radha Krishna and say, my dear Lord, this is my problems. But we don't have to do that when we're chanting Hare Krishna. worrying about so many different things. It's been found that even when devotees actually listen to the Hare Krishna mantra, somehow or another, the ceiling that in the room that they're in doesn't fall down and kill them, even when they're paying attention to the Hare Krishna mantra. So the idea that we have to worry about if I pay too much attention, I won't be able to solve all the problems I have, or something unpleasant will happen to me because I'm concentrating too much. That doesn't happen. Instead, if we sincerely call out to Krishna, to Lord Krishna and to Srimati Radharani, then the result is that they'll reciprocate with us according to how much attention we're paying and how nicely we're chanting. If we want to get the maximum reciprocation from Krishna, then we have to be the maximum free from anxiety possible and even chant with care and attention or some feeling. Krishna never became angry with his devotees because they chanted too feelingly to him. That everyone has feelings. If we can direct that feelings towards Krishna, then our life will gradually become successful. Now, of course, the Mayavadi philosophers, they say that Krishna has no feelings. Unfortunately, we've been brought up, we've been raised in an atheistic society where everyone is believing that if there is a God, then it must be me, or maybe my brother, or maybe it's my father. Or they believe God is some kind of old man sitting on a throne with no face, condemning people to death, throwing them into the hell to burn eternally, or giving them a little harp and horn and asking them to play, glory be God, glory be God. So this kind of understanding of God, he's impersonal, he has no hands, he has no legs, he has no eyes. In other words, he's blind, he's crippled, he's deaf, he's stupid, but we love him anyhow because you got to love someone, so we love him too. Well, Krishna, he spoke Bhagavad Gita, and in Bhagavad Gita, there's full of sense. How could someone who's senseless speak the Bhagavad Gita, which is full of sense? It's the people who are proclaiming that God has no sense, that they're the ones who are senseless. They're trying to give up their essential activities. But Krishna says we're eternal in Bhagavad Gita, and that this world is full of sense. The planets move in their orbits, we have digestion, everything has been arranged very sensibly by the most intelligent person, Krishna. If we want real happiness, then we have to satisfy his senses because he's the reservoir of pleasure. Now, we satisfy his senses or we try to, that doesn't mean that we won't get any happiness. It's not a one-way street. Our philosophy is if you water the root of a tree, then the water goes to the leaves and branches. If you provide food to the stomach, then all the different parts of the body are satisfied. Similarly, Krishna is the root of existence. If we satisfy him, then naturally all our senses will also be satisfied. When Narada Muni learned from the Bhaktivedantas about the process of meditating upon Krishna, after the disappearance of his mother was bitten by a snake while milking a cow. Narada Muni, although he was only 5 years old, he went on pilgrimage and experienced the different environments in this world. Finally, after some time, he sat in meditation upon the Lord in his heart as the Bhaktivedantas taught him. And when he did that, he saw Krishna within his heart. Krishna appeared there. And every part of his body became transcendently livened with ecstasy. And he said he couldn't see himself as being separate from Krishna. So that lasted for some time, and then Krishna disappeared, just to give Narada Muni an experience of what Krishna consciousness is actually like. Similarly, we have senses, and if we satisfy Krishna's senses, then our senses will automatically be satisfied. Just like if you decorate yourself, then automatically the reflection in the mirror is also decorated. Our philosophy is, although we are learning tolerance, at the same time, we're learning tolerance so we can fix our mind upon Krishna, his names, his forms, his quality, and his pastimes, and his associates. And the more we do that in the proper mood of devotion, then the more we'll experience transcendental happiness. And the more transcendental happiness we experience, the more our senses become purified, then the more we'll be able to understand things as they actually are. And therefore become even more encouraged to follow the process of pure devotional service and become more able to tolerate the urges of the senses and check the force of desire and anger. And therefore will actually become happy in this world and forevermore. So I'll read the verse again. Yehi samsparshya bhoga dugaya yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not, Nehi samsparshya bhoga dugaya yonaya evate. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the senses with their objects. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise person doesn't delight in them. So I'll just ask if there is any questions.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Yes, my obeisances. You mentioned about Prabhupada used to be called Swamiji. I heard that he became Prabhupada in Boston, where you're from.
Well, I'm not from Boston.
Oh.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
But you studied
but I went to school in Buffalo, New York.
Oh, Buffalo.
Buffalo, but I don't think he was, Prabhupada was in San Francisco when Govinda Dasi mentioned to him about someone being called Swamiji. And Prabhupada mentioned that Swamiji is a third-class name. So Govinda Dasi asked Prabhupada, Govinda Dasi was his servant at that time, along with her husband, what is a first-class name? So Prabhupada said Vishnupad or Prabhupada or so many different things. So Govinda Dasi said, well, what's the best? And Prabhupada said, Prabhupada. So she said, could we call you Prabhupada? So Prabhupada said, okay, that's all right. So then the name Prabhupada, at least in San Francisco on the West Coast, they started to call, Govinda Dasi told the other devotees there that Swamiji is a third-class name, we should call Prabhupada Prabhupada. And then there was a big controversy, Prabhupada likes Swamiji, so they went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, did you tell us we should call you Prabhupada? And Prabhupada said, I never said that. Whoever said that? So they said, well, what about Swamiji? Is that no problem with Swamiji. What about Prabhupada? Is that a better name? Yes, Prabhupada is a better name. So then they started to call Prabhupada Prabhupada. And then there was gradually there was only really two places in the world at that time where there were devotees of ISKCON. That was on the West Coast and the East Coast. So then there was informed that Prabhupada should be called Prabhupada. And gradually that took over the name Prabhupada. And they stopped calling Prabhupada Swamiji.
I also wanted to ask, when Lord Brahma was on the lotus flower, and he said he had nothing to do, but he's a devotee, so why didn't he chant Hare Krishna?
He had no beads. No, Lord Brahma, before the creation, Krishna gives him a summary of what the creation is going to be. So he knows about Krishna. Brahma is not foolish. He's the most intelligent. But he didn't know what his service was exactly at that time. He had some idea he was supposed to create. But in order to create, he had to be empowered to create. So that creation, that empowerment, of course, is to be fully Krishna conscious. I mean, Brahma didn't go in there completely blind. But at that time, there was there was no yuga. That's like in this age, there is the yuga dharma, which is chanting the holy names. But there was no yuga dharma at that time. Brahma, he's on the purest level of sattva gun, almost Shuddha sattva. So generally speaking, that methodology, as in Krita Yuga or Satya Yuga, that method is meditation, directly meditating on the Lord. But he wanted some instructions how to do that, and Krishna gave the instruction, you should meditate upon tapa. This tapa is not different from Krishna. So he meditated, followed Krishna's instructions because he personally heard from Garbhodakashayi Vishnu to meditate on tapa. Garbhodakashayi Vishnu didn't tell him to chant Hare Krishna. He said meditate on tapa. And because he did that, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu was pleased, Krishna was pleased, and then he revealed the spiritual world to him. So whatever mantra, whatever method Krishna tells us, we follow that according to our circumstance, and then we'll become successful. So Brahma became successful following Garbhodakashayi Vishnu's instructions and meditating upon the two words, which are the wealth and renounced order, namely ta and pa, and that came out eventually, or that eventually qualified him to enter into the spiritual world, into the spiritual realm of consciousness. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Guru.
Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you so much.
So you can ask.
You're going to ask, and I after.
I have a question. Just I say it's not so urgent, but because I see there is maybe time. Something that is on my mind, like I don't know if you will answer. Like if we look at other religions, then we see mainly that the leading thing is the 10 Commandments, and then we can identify with most of these commandments. But I still don't understand why, if let's say Krishna would have said anything in these 10 commandments, we should not steal, we should not murder, we should not lust for others, wives. But why is it says about this to keep the Saturday holy? How is it connect? How is it suddenly connected to anything that Krishna says or to astrology? I don't know.
Saturday, that's Saturn's day.
I don't know.
That's when I don't remember that being one of the 10 commandments. That's another commandment.
One of the 10 commandments is to keep the Saturday holy.
Well, I don't know. Krishna has certain, we have Ekadasi, so the Jews must have had Saturday. Everyone needs a holy day. Take some rest. Think about Krishna more. So the idea of a holy day is that the day in which you can think about Krishna because you're not working so much. So the idea of is not just to work. It's to take some time off and do things which will help increase our Krishna consciousness. So Krishna chose Saturday for that, or at least for the Jews. We have Ekadasi.
But so why is it not to make fire? How is it connected? It just makes it worse. It just makes it more complicated if you cannot put fire.
Well, I don't know Krishna, how they got into all these details. That's the history of religion, how they got into the details. I don't think that's a different thing. I mean, Krishna says one thing, it's like you play this game, you give one child 5 numbers, and then they repeat it to the next child, they repeat it to the next child, and by the time you're done, you have 5 different numbers at the end. So I don't know exactly what Krishna said because I don't remember being there. But in any case, we should spend some time thinking about Krishna and not just work, work, and work. Anything else? Agnihotra, did you have a question or some question? Agnihotra? Was there
Hare Krishna, the question from Vamana Prabhu. What are the first steps to start teaching boys about sense control? How important is it for children to follow Ekadashi?
To what?
How important for children to follow Ekadashi?
Well, it depends how old they are, what age you're talking about. I mean, devotees should follow Ekadashi. They should know what they're doing.
7 years.
7 years. Anyhow, people should voluntarily follow the process. Not that you starve the children and then they hate Krishna consciousness. They grow up, my family practiced Krishna consciousness. They'd starve me twice a month. I remember I was a temple president. This is 1971. We opened, at that time, Prabhupada sent devotees everywhere opening temples. So first I went to Miami to open the temple there, and then they sent me to a temple we were just starting the temple. We didn't have a temple in Houston, Texas. And I joined Vishnu Jan Maharaj there and his servant Srinath. And I became the temple president after Vishnu Jan Maharaj left. But at that time, we had this program because Prabhupada said in one lecture that whenever there's an appearance or disappearance day of any of our devotees, acharyas especially on the calendar, we should have a half-day fast. And our calendar every other day was an acharya's appearance day. So every other day was a half fast day. And of course, when Prabhupada said that in one lecture, that in India, on Ekadasi, they did a full fast. We didn't have any, and that means fasting from water and everything, Nilajal Ekadasi. So that time, not having any other information, we decided that we'd observe every other day, practically speaking, maybe 3 times a week, or a half-day fast for the Acharya's appearance days, all the ones on the calendar. And then on Ekadasi, we'd have a full fast. Needless to say, I was 20 years old at that time. One of the more elderly devotees in the movement. And at that time, there were, 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 20-year-old, whatever, devotees. And they didn't join the Hare Krishna movement to fast. As a matter of fact, they usually join the Hare Krishna movement because they like the prasadam. In any case, after some time, devotees started to leave the temple because they couldn't tolerate. They were getting too thin and hungry all the time. So they wanted to go somewhere where they could eat. So it took me a little while to realize that actually following the fasting to become purified was not the purpose of our movement. The purpose of our movement is to become Krishna conscious, and it wouldn't be achieved if there were no devotees in the temple. So then we changed our program from fasting fully on Ekadasi, Nilajal. We followed Nilajal, but we had 3 big feasts on Ekadasi, but we wouldn't have 1 drop of water. That way we followed Nilajal. No water on Ekadasi. So the idea is that devotees should be happy and they should follow the program according to their ability to tolerate. Of course, I had one devotee in my temple at that time, and he wouldn't do any book distribution. At that time, everyone went on book distribution in Harinam. That was all we did. There was nothing else to do. But he refused to go. We had the preliminary recipes from some of Jamuna's cookbook, especially a very opulent prasadam. And all he'd do is cook these really elegant preparations, gulab jamins and malpuras. He did that every day. That's all he'd do all day. He wouldn't do any other service. The problem was that when we came back after doing Sankirtan for 9 hours a day, then at that time, there was no prasadam because he'd eat all the prasadam. In other words, all this opulent prasadam that we were collecting for, he'd eat. And there were, well, we get some rice, dal, and chapatis sometimes. But in any case, that didn't last very long because eventually he found the girl he was looking for, and then they disappeared. In any case, there's a limit to how much we should, we have to learn some tolerance, but at the same time, we shouldn't force people to tolerate in such ways that become discouraged from the process of Krishna consciousness. So that takes some intelligence where the line is. Just like one time Vishnu Jan Maharaj wrote to Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, my devotees in my temple, all they want to do is eat prasadam every day. That's all they want to do the whole day. Is that all right? And Prabhupada wrote back, he said, that's all right, but they should chant Hare Krishna in between bites. So I hope that answers your question. All right, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. One question more, or you need to go?
Hare Krishna.
Okay, is Prashant ready?
He's bringing the place now.
Okay, so he can bring him in. Okay, one more question.
This question in chat, please, because
In chat.
many words.
Dear
English.
Lord, today you were talking about Tapasya. How much women. Nowadays, there is so much preaching of a woman goddess that is important for her to satisfy her feelings, that she definitely needs to make regular purchases, gifts, so that her husband tries to satisfy all the desires. The same is said about life of men, where a woman is presented as saying, husband ought to satisfy all his desires. Psychologists say that 100% of Africans have a problem that they have in their minds, that they cannot take care of their happiness. They teach to accept all that I have the right to serve myself, that I am worthy or worthy to serve myself. What should Vaishnavas do as they have harmony? What kind of austerity is correct for women and men? I suggest you at least chant 16 rounds a day and take prasadam. At least that much. Don't take anything not offered to Krishna, and don't talk about nonsense, just talk about Krishna, and hopefully everything else will be all right. Yeah, that will satisfy your real self. Otherwise, it won't be. We just satisfy our material desires. It's like pouring water pouring gasoline on a fire. You may temporarily put out the fire by pouring the gasoline, but in a few seconds, it'll simply get inflamed and get larger and larger. All right, thank you very much. Grandaraya Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Hari.
Prahladananda Swami Maharaj ki
Jai.
Krishna.
Спасибо
Спасибо
большое.
большое.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru